Hello and welcome to episode 56 of Heating Up the UK, a Miami Heat UK based podcast. I am your host, Dan Healy, and we are doing it different today. It's the first time ever Heating Up the UK has gone live for this special end of season podcast. This is on Miami Heat UK TV, streaming live. It will be there forever, so if you've missed it, it will always be there. Please subscribe to Miami Heat UK TV whilst you're there, and it will also after tonight be uploaded to all the usual podcast platforms, that's Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, etc. So you'll always be able to find us on your favourite podcast platform. So guys, we are here tonight with our usual stream team from Game Day from the UK. So I'm delighted to be joined by my three guys, John Jablonka, Sam Aquara, Danny Ronaldo. John, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks.
Good stuff, mate. Sam, you good?
Yeah, hay fever's kicking my ass, but I'm good.
Okay, well, this is not basketball, that's the thing. And Danny, how are you, mate?
Yeah, all good, mate. Thanks.
Good stuff, guys. It's been a little while since we last spoke. In fact, the last podcast we did, it seems like forever ago now, but it was previewing the Bucks series. There we were with lots of hype, with lots of hope, and the hopes were truly dashed, just in spectacular fashion dashed. The Bucks well and truly getting their revenge on us, sweeping us after a gallant first game where we took them to overtime, which could have gone either way. After that, let's be honest, it was no contest. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get through a fair bit today. We're going to get into a little bit about what this season was and whether we think it was a failure, etc. We're going to have a look at sort of some of the key players now: Jimmy, Bam, Hero, Robinson, what this team's going to look like going forward. We're going to look at some free agent stuff. We're going to go through just a few things. Pat Riley's comments in his end of his end of season presser. We're going to get into it, but first of all, let's start. Danny, after, as we said, we was all full of hype. We thought this was going to. We thought we was going to give him a game here, and let's be honest, it wasn't, was it? It was no series. It was no contest. So, what do we think, guys? Danny, was this season a failure after that? A first round exit? I don't know whether or not we was expecting maybe to repeat last year's. You know, we was always in that run. Maybe we always thought that on our day we could beat anybody. But, when we ended up not only going out in the first round, but just being swept aside, no contest really. Therefore, was this season a failure?
Looking back on it, I think with the expectation that we had from last year, cheers, Peter. With the expectation that we had coming off last season, I think you could call this a failure. I think, I thought that at least you'd get to the conference finals. This season coming off of last year, and the fact that we got swept in the first round is just a major disappointment. But it was kind of all signs pointed to that happening, I guess, or to something like that happening in the playoffs, just due to the season that we had. It was up and down all the way, the whole season. And it felt very much like that in the Bucks series as well. It was very up and down. There were flashes where you were thinking, this was really good basketball, especially game one. Like you said, it was very close. That OT game, that was really tense. But we couldn't close it out like we closed OTs last year. Last year we were fierce in overtime. This year, not so much. And it showed in the playoffs. We flamed out in the first round in a sweep. And yeah, I would say this is a disappointment.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think that, look, once we got into that side of the draw, we was looking for the 4-5 spot, a series against even the Knicks or the Hawks, and with that defeat to the Bucks in the second from last game, it pretty much resigned to the fact that we was going to be facing them. It was like both teams accepted that was going to be the tie. Which surprised me a little bit. I thought maybe the Bucks wouldn't want any of that it would play on their minds, but clearly they wanted that game because they played hard in that game. John, do you think that once that side of the draw was sort of it was put in place that we was going to be playing the Bucks, do you think that whatever happened then, it gave the Heat maybe that little sort of relief, the fact that, okay, if we go out first round, we've gone out to the Bucks, which is no shame. But the reason why I asked Danny, was it a failure, is because there was no contest in that. We didn't offer them anything other than a battle in game one. It was men versus boys, and that's why I asked that. Was it a failure? So do you think that once that sort of side of the draw got put in place, do you think that the Heat maybe looked at it as though, well, if we're going to go out, we've gone out to a good team?
Yeah, that's what I was always thinking we shouldn't push for 4 or 5 because I don't think this season showed that we were even good enough to make a deep playoff run. We'd probably lose to the Sixers considering how we played versus the Bucks. So that's why I wanted to just play the toughest team, the Nets or the Bucks. But I wasn't seeing a sweep by 30 points almost every game. I was thinking the games would be more like the first games. So that's what makes it a failure. But
yeah,
I think we got fooled by the last season that we're thinking this team is actually good enough to compete when it wasn't.
I think that there is a bit of that. I think you're right. I think that it just annoys me a little bit when you see that first round against, say, the Hawks, that it probably would have been against the Hawks. You know, you would, that would still been a very tasty game, but you would have looked at that. Then you look at what they've done now, already taking game 1 against the Sixers in their own arena, which just doesn't happen. You just think, wow, that really was when you look back at it now, and I know it's hindsight, you really look at that now and think that was the way, really. If we was going to try and get anything, we was going to repeat that. That was the side of the draw to get on. But look, it didn't happen. That was that. Sam, we have to ask the question then. Have this team regressed from last year? Because it's very much the same sort of roster, barring a couple of teams. Barring a couple of players. But as I said, who holds their head up here and say they've improved as a player?
I want to say by default, this team has digressed, and it's not in actuality. It's just the fact that every other team has improved, and I'd say marginally just improved. You have a look at what the Nets are doing right now, and they've gone right out the park. We just played Milwaukee, and you've seen what happened with Drew Holiday, and we've been drumming this from the start of the season that everyone seems to be getting better, and we just hope to get into stride before the playoffs. And I guess it just wasn't enough. We just needed to get better in terms of manpower.
Yep. Talking about manpower, we've got some comments here already. If anyone's in the comments, by the way, fire them away. I know that people that will be going to be listening on the podcast won't see them, but I'll read them out. We're going to answer questions all the way through this. Grant saying, my favourite part of the season with us being linked to everyone from James Harden to Bugs Bunny. Now, talking about James Harden there, a lot of people jumped straight on that, straight after the sweep, said all the usual things that we probably knew was going to happen, but there's nothing here, Danny, is there, that the Heat could have done with this James Harden thing. People need to remember that a lot of people are biting and going straight back in for that. Oh, the Heat didn't want to give up Tyler Hero to get James Harden. Let's put it in perspective, Danny, right? We had no chance with this trade, did we? They had nothing that we was interested in.
No, it was a question of throwing the kitchen sink and more at the Rockets to get James Harden. And even then, did we have the assets that they wanted? And the answer was no. It was said that James Harden would like to play here, but his preferred destination was Brooklyn at the time. Yep. Brooklyn had the assets, that they wanted, and it just didn't pan out. And it's very easy to say that Pat didn't want to give up Tyler Hero for James Harden, but that's just not the case. We all know that's not the case. But the trolls on Twitter and stuff, they don't. So it was just we weren't going to trade every single piece that we had for James Harden if that was even going to get it done, because Pat is a bit sentimental and he does like the guys on the team. So it's a difficult balance. But even then, like I said, Brooklyn probably weren't going to take us anyway. So.
No, that's from what we all hear. There was nothing
the Rockets,
really. There was nothing really that the Rockets had that was interesting in them at all from Miami. And you are right. He was on the shortlist. I think he was always going to put that shortlist out there. But everybody knows the first team he said when he said get me out of Houston, the idea he said to his agent, do whatever you can to get me to Brooklyn. So he ended up in Brooklyn, and that's it. So I just wanted to nip that in the bud because, again, even though the trolls were there, it annoyed me that narrative was still around, and it was nothing to do with Tyler Hero.
I'll just point because the Dame conversation came up, and I saw a poll: would you trade Bam for Dame? Would you trade Bam for Harden then? Because the Rockets would probably want Bam instead. So Would you trade Bam for
Well,
him?
No, I wouldn't.
that is a good point as well, because everybody just thinks, oh, well, you can't include Bam and Jimmy. Well, then you're not going to get a superstar then. So it's the same thing with Dame. I mean, if you're going to get Dame, you're going to have to give up Bam. So it's the same thing. The Heat have got to make that decision. It is a tough one. I'm sort of Dame's biggest fan, so I would probably drive Bam there. But it's certainly not something that I would be fussed at either way. It's one of those things, isn't it? It's our future. Bam is our future. So we'll get on to Dame in a little while. We're going to maybe sort of end with how we might be able to get that wow at the end of the show. But let's come on. We're going to talk about a few players here. We're going to talk about Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, and Duncan predominantly. Let's start with Jimmy. John, he's due this extension. From everything we hear, he's going to get this extension. First of all, your thoughts on that? Is he worth it? Is it the right thing to do?
Yeah, the Heat should give him the max. I don't think he would be worth the max, but you got to do. That's what you need to do to keep superstars these days. So he will have to get it and should. And I wouldn't. He shouldn't even considering like taking a pay cut or anything. But I don't think Jimmy at 35 would be worth 50 mil.
No.
But he could be another CP3 example.
Yeah, I think that I mean, I hate the Supermax and all these extensions and all that. I've always hated. I just think it cripples anybody. It doesn't matter how good a team is or how good a player is. Sorry, unless you're Kawhi, KD, or LeBron, I don't think anybody's worth that. I just think that whatever it is, it gives you no flexibility. So I never liked it. But having said that, it's there. You want this superstar, whether you call Jimmy a superstar or not, is up to you. But we know what he brings this team, so it's not his fault. He will always get paid. Never should a player feel bad about taking that money. They've earned it. He's going to take it. It shouldn't be up to him taking a discount to maybe give you more flexibility. He'll take it what's on offer that is due to him. So you can't want a star and then moan that you've got to pay a star. So I think it's going to happen. I think it should happen. I think it will happen. Having said that, Sam, Jimmy sort of gave the usual sort of song and dance as he did last year, the arrogance, the confidence, the stupidly locked in stuff that he came out with. We didn't see much of it this year. It felt like to me, Sam, he gave up a little bit after this, after maybe the second game, maybe or the third game. He just felt that this group wasn't what we saw, what he saw maybe in last year's group, where he was literally blood, sweat, and tears. We didn't see that much. Didn't see much take over Jimmy. What do you think? Do you think that's fair or not?
I agree. I don't even need to agree. It's obvious. We didn't see much from Jimmy, and similar with Bam. But for me, I feel it's collective. It just doesn't boil down to Jimmy alone. Jimmy could have stepped up in specific games. We saw what he did in game one. His shot wasn't falling, but he took charge. He went to the free throw line. He drove to the basket when he had to. Game 2, 3, and 4 was just an eyesore. Bam, games 1 to 4, we were just not pleased with what we saw from him. I'm going to take it a step further and say Erik Spoelstra. I think he's the one person that let me down. Coming into the series, there was all this talk about how the biggest matchup will be on the benches. It will be Spo versus Coach Budenholzer, and you could actually see what Steve Nash is doing to Bud right now. That's exactly what I expected from Spo, but it's collective. I think every man's responsible for how this season went down, and there's got to be a lot of soul searching this off season if we want to get back to where we were last year.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think it's been covered quite well through various podcasts that there was, that we just didn't see Spo adapt to what he would usually do. This is normally the sort of thing that he loves, a 7-game series against any one team. You normally see Spo come out on top, and it just didn't happen for him, but it didn't happen for the whole group, really. Just staying on Jimmy then, Danny, do you think that he can? I mean, he is our leader. He is our star without a doubt. But if we're going to win a championship, and I know we came very close last year to winning the championship, but can Jimmy Butler be the number one option on a title-winning team, or do you see him as just one of the very best second options? And it's something that the Heat will need to address maybe in the summer if we're going to get over the hump.
If you're talking about the number one offensive option, then no. Jimmy is very much more the sort of emotional leader of the group, and he puts his kind of heart and soul into each game and gives you all he can every night. So in that respect, he is our number one guy because the team goes as Jimmy goes, and they sort of they should follow his lead, you know. But in terms of you know, can he be the number one guy on a championship team, like the number one offensive guy? Then no. I think you need another guy, almost like a 1.5 kind of guy, to kind of to give him a bit of support, because you didn't get that from Bam. You know, Bam's supposed to be that number two guy next to Jimmy, and you know we didn't really get we didn't really get that from Bam. So yeah, I think those two alone can't do it.
No, okay, that's good, and we're going to come on to that in a second, especially with Bam next. One more question on Jimmy, John. There was a bit of friction, maybe, or a bit of talk, sort of, that leaked about some unrest in in sort of like a bit of confrontation with coaching staff, with Butler, with playing staff, etc. Is that just the way a sort of well-knit championship like a team will roll, or is there anything to be concerned about there? I think Pat sort of brought it up as go, you don't want everything all, you know, lovey-dovey in there. You want that bit of friction. That's, you know, that's part and parcel of it. Is there anything here that anybody should be worried about?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't take Spo or anyone on the Heat team to just take it personally, like the Wolves or something. But yeah, like Pat said, it's not always going to be nice in the locker room, and I think the Heat are ready for that. They know that he doesn't mean anything by it, and that he's the leader. So I wouldn't take anything like that from whatever anyone said.
I agree. The bottom line is that the team's mentality is aligned with Jimmy's mentality, which is we just want to win. And I think if anything's not showing that, whether it be maybe coaching decisions or playing, you know, personnel or whatever it may be, you know, they're gonna voice their opinions because they're winners. So I don't think there's anything to worry about there.
He definitely missed a bit of a spark, I feel like, this season compared to last season. It didn't feel like a collective unit like it did last year. And I think although you can't take, you know, these rumors about this, you know, these confrontations and things inside the locker room, you know, you take them with a pinch of salt. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was like a little bit of friction that we should maybe worry about. I'm not saying that's true, and I'm not saying that's, you know, that is what happened, but just from an eye test perspective, seeing last season and the camaraderie with this group compared to this season, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe there was a little bit of tension here and there because they weren't performing to the way that, you know, we expected them to. So, you know, it's always going to be testy in the locker room. You know, it's a competitive sport, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe those rumors were, you know, slightly true, but maybe over exaggerated a little bit. I don't know.
But we also have to consider, like, just like how the Lakers have just been knocked out of the playoffs, we've gone out in the first round, and this is after a long stretch of the bubble where the whole team were like cramped together for can't remember how long, and then the short off season, and it's back to this season with strict restrictions on what was it, just team time in terms of like videos, video stuff, and it's just been a weird season off the back of an even worse season. So
yeah, 100%. That is a fair point to bring up because we know that all the teams that had a short off season have struggled this year. So that is a fair point to bring up. But it brings me back to the very first question. You said it looked like Jimmy gave up on this group because, to your point there, Danny, the camaraderie, it was just like chalk and cheese. You just saw Jimmy with fire in his belly last year, and that was a fundamental reason of why we went all that way, and just didn't see it this year. So yeah, okay, we'll see what happens. Obviously, he's going to get paid. We're going to make moves. We're going to try and move this along for Jimmy's timeline. So it's going to be a really interesting summer. But we'll come on to all of that in a second. Let's move on to Bam. Sam, stand with you. First question on Bam. I asked Greg Sylvander in one of the preview Bucks series games, has Bam Adebayo improved this season? And he said yes. I think that's fair, and I think he has. But then he was completely ineffective in that series, and it made you realise that he's still got a very long way to go, which is not an unreasonable thing to say. So I'll ask you the same question: has Bam Adebayo improved this season?
Absolutely, and we could all see it. Although it wasn't to the level that we wanted it, and it didn't come at times when we wanted it, it was obvious to see how he's improved. Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of the regular season game with the Nets where the ball was in Bam's hand at the end of the game. He took us home. And loads of other games where after he'd been called out, that he just put in a monster performance. He took offensive charge and he just balled out. But it would be unfair to say he hasn't improved. He's definitely improved. Might not be to the extent at which most people would like, but he's definitely improved.
Yeah. John, come back to you a sec. The sort of main Heat Twitter grumble throughout this season was the same thing we'd heard a lot, which was Bam saying on defeats that he's not effective. Sorry, that he's not aggressive enough. We've seen improvements from his game. We're 100%. This mid-range that he'd worked on had become a big point of it. But that's something that's not going to be tolerated really going forward next year, is it? I think is it fair to say that before we start looking at him bringing out a 3-point shot or whatever that may be, that he dominates his opponent more? He shows more aggressive. He looks at the basket. He doesn't just look for the shooter. Is that the first thing that's got to be addressed for him to take this next step?
Yeah, and that's the most annoying part because it's not his basketball skills that's questioned. It's just his mental. I think even it was Eric Reed that got annoyed when he had some little guy on him and he travelled. He wasn't even looking at the rim. That's not anything about he can't like shoot it. He just didn't want to shoot it, and that's the main problem with him. And I think another off season with Jimmy, maybe just another off season to get his mind right, get his mentality right for the next season.
Yeah, and I think that it can maybe point back a little bit to coaching as well, because it might not just be the Jimmy thing. It might be that the fact that the main play is to look for the shooter, for the dribble handoff with Duncan. It's been so successful for so long. So, and I think Pat had maybe a little bit of an underlying dig there at that in his presser to say that maybe that the structure of how we use Bam has got to change because he's got all the tools there, hasn't he? I can see Danny, you're nodding along. You agree with this?
Yeah, I've been saying it since I think the first time I sort of brought it up was I think when we had Yanni on for one of our pre-game streams, and it just felt to me like it's definitely on Bam. He needs to be more aggressive. He needs that mentality, that killer mentality that he just doesn't have yet. Pointing out, something that one of the, I think Ethan Skolnick from 5 Reasons said, that maybe it's because, he's never really grown up as that kind of player. So it's, can that be learnt or do you have to be born with that? I don't know. We'll see. But also I think it does rest on Spo. And I think, he, like I've said this a couple of times, but I don't think Bam has been given the keys to be free in the offense. He's very much the facilitator on the offensive end. And it only seems to be when he's called out on it by his teammates where he comes out and he's aggressive. So I think it lands on both of them. I think they need to have a little rethink as to how they use Bam, like what Pat said in the presser. Before we think about 3-point shooting, we need to first learn how to dominate inside. And I think that's what next season is going to be all about for Bam.
That's really, really well summarised, mate. I think that Sam, just the final question then on Bam, on the back of what Danny just said there, that's a lot to improve on. That's a lot that he knows he's got to do. I completely believe that he's got the capabilities and the mindset to do that. Do we ever think he will be that impact player, that takeover player, that Jokic, that Embiid, that you can just go, we're going to win the game because he's on our team? Or do you just not think that maybe that is part of his game, that he'll always be an elite player, an elite centre, but he's not going to ever be that takeover player? Or do you think that we've got to just look back and think, hang on, this guy's still only 23 years old. He's got a lot of learning to do. He's making strides. Let's just give him a bit more time.
I mean, we have seen instances where he had been that kind of player. Glaringly in the last playoff, especially the Boston series, him being on the court was a good part of why we're able to win that series. I feel the question is, will we be able to see that part of him consistently? And I believe it's something he can work on. And I hope it's something he'll be bringing on to the next season.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good stuff. Go for it, John.
So I always see him as a Draymond type player, just a ceiling raiser. But like you said, he's only 23, 24, and Jokic is 27. And only just broke up 2-3 seasons ago. So I think right now he still is just a passive ceiling guy. But he has the tools to be a Jokic. I just think we need to give him more time.
Yep, not completely fair enough. Okay, let's see what happens with Bam. Important off season for him. We'll see what happens. Right, let's move on. Tyler Herro. Pat had some big words to say about him. This is someone that, maybe I think it's very fair to say that we have seen regression for him. I think that's not a criticism because we had high hopes of him, but he's had he's basically, since he's come into the franchise, he's basically played basketball for 2 years non-stop, pretty much, this guy. And I know he's a young guy, but there's no development. There's been no way to start, to get a full off season with him, to get to work on things. We tried him at point guard. It didn't happen. He went back to shooting guard. He's had his injury problems with that foot and so on. And he's had all this hype and this expectation over him. But despite that, Pat had some good words to say about him. He called him an elite ball handler. John, I'll stay with you. Do you think that Tyler will ever be the guy that maybe Heat Twitter or Heat Nation expect him or want him to be, which is maybe this third piece? Or do you think that if he's going to be your third piece, then really we're not going to be going too far? Because what is his ceiling here? Is it? I mean, do we think that he could be this? We was criticised, or it almost seems laughable now that we sort of built him up to be in this Devin Booker mould. Well, at the moment, he's nowhere near that. Booker's made another incredible leap this year. Have we got to manage our expectations? Do we think that he will ever get to those levels, or do we just got to accept that he's just going to be a nice role player throughout his career?
I don't think you can set a ceiling on a young guy like that, especially a guard, because they break out later. But if I had to put out, give him a CJ type ceiling, not an all-star, maybe an all-star if he's lucky, but I wouldn't put him as a All-NBA consistent all-star though.
No. Okay, so Sam, do you think then that if his ceiling is maybe 1-2-time all-star, and you've got a player there that John just mentioned like CJ McCollum, who you never know, could be available. Portland could do some bits this season. Tyler would maybe be their most tradable asset. Is it fair to say that, first and foremost, is Tyler Herro our most tradable asset? And if that's the case, if we're saying that he's maybe at his very best a single or two-time all-star maybe, well, why not go and get CJ McCollum, who is pretty much at that level now?
Is he our best tradable asset? I might have to say yes when you consider the contract as well, because obviously he's on his rookie contract. Mm-hmm. Would I trade him for someone the likes of CJ McCollum? Putting next season into consideration, I'd say no, because we're talking financials again, and I'm at the point where I say we need a whale. We need a big guy, and CJ McCollum is not big enough.
Okay, fine. But we're gonna do Duncan in a second, and then we're going to talk about players and how this maybe the money works and where we go, because it could be a complete overhaul. It could be a tweak. We'll get into all this in a minute. One more thing on Tyler, Danny. Do you think then that he sees Jimmy's cycle through? Because Jimmy's got maybe another 3 years of being at a title-winning level. He's still always going to be a great player because of the way he's conditioned and the way he keeps himself. But we're maybe saying that maybe 2 or 3 more years of what we've seen of Jimmy in a Heat uniform so far is what we're going to get. Does Tyler see that through?
It's really difficult to say, but if you're basing it on the Jimmy timetable and optimizing your team around Jimmy and his sort of peak level, then he's not really on that level, right? He's still at this development stage. So, I think he could possibly be one of our most tradable assets. And if you're in that win now mode, which we always are, and you're on Jimmy's timetable, then if you can get someone good for a package Tyler with someone, I think you get him to balance that timetable and Jimmy's timetable, I think.
Yeah, I think that it's probably an unfair question because it could go either way. And I really want to see Tyler next year. I want to see him with a full off season behind him, and I want to see him develop into a player that I know he is than what we saw in year one. I've just got a feeling that we're not going to see Tyler Herro in a Heat uniform anymore. I think we're done. I think he's going to be traded for somebody. But we'll get into that in a second. Last player. Let's come on to Duncan Robinson. We've spoke about him all year, John. We've spoke about this dilemma about do we pay him and what he's worth and so on. It's either now he re-signs or he's going to be maybe a sign and trade sort of bait to get this next player. Because we're not letting him walk, are we? What's going to happen here? What do we think?
I think it just depends on how much he asks for.
Yeah.
This is a second. Like, I don't think it's fair to say he played bad when it was against Bucks. They're a good defensive team, and
I mean, he got like 7 threes in the. I think what did he go?
first
10,
game, and then he just
14
First
or
game.
something in the first game.
First game he was on fire, and then they just adapted to him, and he never had a look in after that.
yeah, he's easily adaptable. That's what happened to last year playoffs as well. But then for the whole regular season, he was again on a historic pace. Yeah, I think it just depends if he asks for a lot, but I don't think he can. I don't think he has the leverage to ask for more because of the series.
So, go on, Danny.
Well, it depends on what other teams are willing to.
This is what I was just about to say. So that was the next thing. Is look, when he was asked, he said, "Look, first and foremost, I've got to find myself a good fit because there's no guarantees. Obviously, coming back to the Heat, I think maybe his preference is going to be that." But Sam, do you think that he goes out, tests the water, and someone's going to put that offer sheet in front of him in that region of around 18 to 20 million? And if so, what do we do? Match it?
I don't want to put a figure on it, but Duncan Robinson will get however much he wants this off season, because I can count on 2 hands how many elite sharpshooters there are in the league. Like, I heard this recently, I can't remember where, but there are shooters and then there are shooters, and Duncan Robinson has earned the right as a shooter, and we just have to pay him. We just have to suck it up and pay him, find a way to make the books work, because you can't let that sort of talent get away.
Okay, right. Well, I'm going to come on. I've got one more question on Duncan, and then we're going to come on to if we pay him, as Sam is saying, Sam is saying, then what that means then for potential targets, because it won't then mean that we've got that much room left to maybe get this team up to championship sort of contending level. But we'll come on to it. One more question on Duncan, Danny. I put a poll out a day or two ago about 2 impending free agents, Duncan Robinson and Tim Hardaway Jr. on Dallas. I think that's a tough one. I think if you had to sign one, if you had one guy only, who would you go for? Duncan won that poll. Well, I think that's quite a tight question. What do you think?
It's difficult. I didn't see that poll, actually. Tim Hardaway Jr. is very streaky. He can get hot, and when he got a hot hand, he's almost unstoppable sometimes. He looks quite elite, actually, when he's rolling. But like Sam said, Duncan Robinson is an elite 3-point shooter. He is arguably one of, if not the best true 3-point shooters in the league. I would say I would rather Duncan. But when we circle back to the would you pay, what are we doing with the Duncan situation, I'll let you know.
Yeah,
I already know, but I'll let you know.
It's pretty much that, isn't it? John, I can see you sort of clicking away there. Does that mean you're looking at stats or comparisons between the two?
Yeah, I'm just looking at Hardaway stats.
I knew it. Love him. What you got for us, mate?
Hardaway Jr. is not really. He's also a really good 3-point shooter as well. Almost 40% in the last 2 seasons on over 7 attempts.
Yeah, and he's better defensively as well. He's a decent defender,
and he can actually create his shots more easier than Duncan. He won't be a better shooter or catch and shoot shooter.
Yeah,
but I think with Jimmy and Bam, I think this would be more valuable to the offense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Well, before we move on, then let's just go around very quickly. 1-word answer: Tim or Duncan? John.
I'll say Tim.
Tim. Sam.
Duncan.
Danny.
I mean, if I had to choose, Duncan, but I don't think Duncan's gonna. I don't know.
Okay, that's fun. Right, let's get on to the overhaul. Before we do, Grant has asked, I think we'll see none leave for sure, sadly. I think you're bang on, Grant. I don't see any way Kendrick comes back to the Heat. I think the Knicks or somebody like that are going to throw around 15 million at him. And I don't think the Heat will match that. Anybody see any reason, before we move on, anybody see any way, shape or form that Kendrick is back on the Heat next year?
If we can't find a point guard on the market.
The only way I see Kendrick coming back next year is if Pat says run it back, and I'll be so upset.
He's not going to run this back.
We're not running this team back.
No.
No chance.
No. Sentimental shit's out the window now.
Exactly that. Exactly that. John, what do you think?
Yeah, he's not coming back. Maybe a sign and trade will be an option for us, but I don't think he won't be coming back.
I think he'll get paid though.
He will get paid
by someone.
He will get paid, and to be fair, I hope he does because he's earned that. You know, he was a G League player, he was a nothing player. He's earned that bag. He'll go and get 15 million from somebody, and well done to him. But yeah, he's not coming back. I'll be shocked if he's coming back. So let's get onto it then, guys. We're going to talk about a few free agents and how this team could be constructed. First of all, Danny, do you think this does need a complete overhaul, or is there just tweaks needed here? Because what we've learned from Pat's comments again, really, is it's Bam and it's Jimmy. Everybody else is on the table if the right player is along. What do you overridingly see this being here? Do you think this will be a complete overhaul? Because it's been, you know, it hasn't been a successful season. It hasn't been a car crash. It hasn't been a disaster, but it's not been a successful. Pat's last words were, or one of the last words were, when asked about that Bucks series, he said it was bad. And that's quite damning on everybody, players, coaches, everything, for your president, your boss to say that was bad. So do we think that this will be a complete overhaul, or do you think that it will be first and foremost point guard, scorer, and whatever else? Or do you think that, what's your thoughts, mate?
Well, I think if you want a point guard, if you want a scorer, if you want a decent 4 or a 5 to go next to Bam, then you are almost looking at a complete overhaul at that point anyway. And I think that is what's coming. Like, I've just got this feeling that, you know, I don't know if people like Goran Dragic are even going to be on the team next season. You know, and I love Goran. But if you're wanting to attract, you know, some marquee free agents or get some big sign and trades going, then you're going to have to gut the roster. And I think the fact that, you know, Pat was basically just saying, you know, Jimmy and Bam. He didn't mention anybody else. I mean, obviously he mentioned them later on in the presser, but at the beginning it was basically, like you said, it was Jimmy and Bam are the core of this team, and
everybody else,
nothing else.
Yep,
yeah. So I see a big reshuffle, and I look forward to it as well. Actually, I'm quite excited because if it does happen, it's exciting stuff.
It is, yeah, 100%. John, there's flexibility here, 100%, because we've got 4 players, I think, maybe 5, that are actually guaranteed money next year. What do you think here with the team options on people like Dragic and Iguodala, who have big team options? They're obviously not going to come back for that money. They're either going to come back on a short 1 year low deal, or we're going to use that money to maybe look for a sign and trade to get another star, maybe. What do you think? How do you think that they're going to play this?
I think Dragic should be a safe bet that he comes back on a minimum-ish deal. Yeah, I think that will be the most sentimental thing Pat will do, to bring him back on a minimum, because he's still good. He just needs rest and get his health back. But as for Iggy, I think he's definitely gone. I don't see why would we even bring him back.
So do you think then that you said like a sentimental thing? Do you think Pat's still feeling that way? Do you think he looks at this team now and thinks the sentiments are going out the window? I mean, I bet he's Goran and we love him, and his jersey's going to go in the rafters, we hope. But do you not think that maybe that would be better, that sort of money can be used to attract the star?
Will that even be a big difference if you got a minimum? I don't think Dragic would ask for a big contract.
Well, the team option is about 19 million.
They would definitely decline that. But then just
it depends on. It just depends on the ask from Goran, right, and from the team, and what he's willing to come back for. And if it's too high, then you sign him, you trade him.
Yeah. Okay, Sam.
I mean, I'm sad about that. That would hurt me a lot because I love Goran. We all love Goran, but
of course.
If you want this, I think it's at a point now, especially after the playoffs. So it's at the point now where it's just like you can't be sentimental anymore. Pat has made too many sentimental moves in these past couple of seasons, and it's just okay. Let's go old school. Let's just blow it up and retool. I think.
And you got to remember that Pat is 75, 76 years old. So what he's going to look at this, go, I've got Jimmy's timeline because it's on the same sort of timeline as I'm working on. So we'll see there. It's going to be, as you said, it's going to be really interesting. That's the most intriguing part, I think, of this offseason. What happens with that, with those big contracts on team options? Sam, do you think that? What do you think is the most important thing? I think we've asked this before here, but do you think the most important way forward here, the priority, if you like, is going to be a true point guard, a Kyle Lowry, for example? Or do you think that we've got to get some size in there? Do you think someone next to Bam in the 4 is maybe the way we look? Or a 3-level scorer, somebody who's going to get you that 25 points a night guaranteed. I think maybe the look here will be they will try and address at least 2 of those options, and I've got every faith in them, by the way, that they can do that. But first of all, the question: what would you prioritise here for the Heat out of those 3 glaring issues?
I'd say a 3-level scorer. Right now, what we need is a 3-level scorer, and if we can get it at the point guard position, that would be fantastic. But preferably, I was looking at the free agents list. And there's nothing fantastic about this free agency. I think the top dogs in this year's free agency is Chris Paul, who I think is on a player option.
Yeah, player option, yeah.
I think it's the same with Kyle Lowry as well.
Kyle's an unrestricted free agent.
Is he? So yeah, we've got Chris Paul, we've got Kyle Lowry, DeRozan.
Yeah.
Nothing fantastic. Like, Pat's got to really pull the rabbit out the hat this year.
Which is why then you look at the Goran contract and the Iggy contract and you think, well, how are we going to get these guys in a trade if we get sentimental and we keep Goran? You know, we need to match this money somehow. That's the issue.
This is it. See, the free agents thing is sort of in our control. I personally think the number one option here, the guy that we're going to go for will be Kyle. I think there's a relationship with Jimmy. I think he's even at his age, I think he's a guy that that would slip in seamlessly to what we are, a defense-minded, ball handling point guard who can score still, who can handle the ball, who can facilitate everything. I think that will be. I personally would be very surprised if we don't have Kyle on the team next year. What
Really?
The next move then? Yeah, personally, I think that will be done. I think there was big shocks all the way around that didn't get done on trade deadline. I think that was almost expected to happen across the board there with the Heat and with Kyle. I think I'll be very surprised personally if that doesn't happen. So what will now facilitate what goes next then is what number that is, because what Kyle brings in then sort of makes you then start to do the sums of what we can then afford, i.e. a DeRozan, who again I think would be perfect, somebody that can still get you buckets constantly. Danny, what do you think? Do you think that that's a realistic? Do you think that first and foremost, maybe they're the 2 that Pat is going to look at, Kyle plus player, i.e. a DeRozan?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think it's almost a guarantee at this point that Kyle comes to Miami. Just the way that the trade deadline sort of worked out, it was a shock that wasn't made. So no, I agree with you there. In terms of and someone else, that's the big question for me. It's a big, right? For me, it's a big next to Bam.
Okay.
I don't really know though. I'm not really sure. I mean, I've seen a lot of sort of Porzingis, Markkanen stuff going around. I mean, you don't like that. I mean, I don't particularly like that. Markkanen, I like Markkanen. I think he's got a lot of potential. I'd have to think more about the big situation because there's not a lot of bigs that I can see getting traded here, to be honest, that is going to impact the team at the level that we need. Spreading the floor. Oh, sorry.
The one thing that was plus this playoffs and toward the end of the season was Dwayne Dedman, and I believe it was in his postseason press conference or some interview where he mentioned that he's still learning the plays that the Heat run. So I'd like to see him on the team next year, and this time a lot more time he spent on the team. Hopefully, it will be a lot more impactful. if he's
I,
healthy.
I personally think that both Dwayne Dedman and Ariza will probably be back next year. I think Dedman almost certainly. I think the vet's minimum. I think he's just been. It suits him to be back next year. I think it suits us, him, all way around there. That seems like a good move. Ariza depends what he wants to do because he might command some money, and it's not something we're going to throw money at. I think he's been very impactful, very good, but I wouldn't want to be paying him anything more than really that minimum deal. What do you think about that, John? Just before we move on to one last question, do you think that we will see Ariza and Dedman back?
I think we'll definitely see Dedman back. Another free agent. You already mentioned this once. Kelly Olynyk.
Yes.
Kels.
I'd say yes. I'd say yes to that.
Talking about bigs with Bam, he'd probably fit right in. He already knows the plays or all that stuff.
Well, he's not going to be bringing in 11 odd million again, is he? So you never know. Yeah, it could be. I mean, he was brilliant in Houston, although to be fair, he was the only one maybe trying in Houston when he went there. So I wouldn't be sad to see Kels back, but I don't know. I think that might be a little bit down the list to see what happens, but it depends what money's available at the end of it.
We also forgot Oladipo's still on the team.
That was my next question, mate. Thank you very much. In fact, now you can answer it. Oladipo, he seems like the forgotten guy, really, doesn't he, here? What do you think happens now? Because he's not going to get paid. No one's going to be throwing money at a player that's got this clear injury record here that no one knows the availability. No one's going to be throwing big money here. Do we see him on the Heat? He's going to be working out with us. He's going to be spending the summer there. Do we see there being any future, any way here that Vic is back in Miami? We think it will be maybe November, they said, before he's back playing contact basketball again. So that's not horrific. He'll be back for sort of the start of the season. Vic in Miami next year, yes or no, mate?
I think the way Pat said they're going to keep monitoring him over the off season, and I think if they find he's at full health, they may bring him back. But if there's any like questions about his health, I don't see him coming back. Might as well just get someone else that will at least be on the court playing.
Yep, fair enough.
I really, really liked his sort of 4 games that he played for us.
We all did, man.
I really, really liked it. I thought it was amazing. It brought this sort of energy to the team that felt like it was missing. Obviously, massive sadness that he went down. I don't think he's going to be with the team next year. I think the fact that he declined, surgery from the Heat organization and went sort of outside the organization. That I heard that he went sort of to his personal doctors and stuff like that. The fact that it doesn't seem like there's not much sort of Oladipo chat in the Miami sphere at the moment. I just feel like maybe in his mind this was a good fit. But now that he's in it, maybe it might not be. I know, obviously, he's injured, so it's obviously difficult to tell. But it just feels like he doesn't quite belong here. No one's talking about him. He wasn't mentioned hardly at all. And was he mentioned in the presser at all? I don't even know. Only
to sort of say that.
Yeah, we'll work him out in the. Yeah. I don't think he's going to be back. No,
I'll be surprised
because I enjoyed it.
It is sad. I think that if he does, it will be maybe on some sort of exception level, and he'll want to be here. It's whether he wants to be a part of it. Every indication is that he was desperate to be here from the start. So you never know. We could see him. But I'm with you, Danny. I'll be surprised. we're not going to be committing any big money to him. That's for sure. No one will do it, to be honest. Right. Final question then, guys. We think that maybe Portland could tear it up a little bit here after their first round exit. Their idea was maybe that the ideology maybe was that perhaps the Clippers would have done as well, but now they've gone through. You would probably expect them to maybe get all the way into the finals now. Who knows? So the Kawhi dream might be sort of on the back burner. Is there any way, Sam? Is there any way you can see how Pat could somehow get Dame Lillard to Miami? Give us some hope. Give us some hope, man.
There are obstacles, but there are not.
But there are none.
I mean, anything's possible. I mean, we've seen what's happened with the big contracts with Russell Westbrook, John Wall, exactly. Chris Paul just being shipped around. There is a way to get things done, and Pat will find a way if there is one.
Okay, so let's ask you then. So Dame Lillard, they say, yeah, you can have Dame, but we want Bam, we want Duncan, we want Tyler, we want Dragic, and whatever draft stuff you've got. You doing it? 31 years old, I think.
Yeah.
30?
Doing
Just
Mello.
remember your Twitter name was Bam Boro.
I mean, if we get Damian Lillard, I'm a bit more comfortable letting Duncan Robinson go. But Bam's is a bit too much of a stretch for me.
Okay. That's some extension as well. We'll have two guys on like 50 million, won't we? In a couple of years' time. Right, okay. Final question to you all before we leave it, guys. Danny, two guys, realistically, that you think will be on this team next year who aren't at the moment. I'm going to give you mine. Why you all think. I'm going to give you mine. I think Kyle Lowry will be almost certain. I'll be honest with you. I think that's the need. I'm going to go with DeRozan. I think he's the next guy that I think it depends on the money. I think if he commands that 30 million, which to be honest, he's still a borderline all-star, so he can go and get that bag. But I think if he thinks, okay, I could take a cut here, Kyle Lowry could come in, Jimmy Butler could be there, Bam will be there, Tyler could be there. It will then mean that Duncan won't be there because there's not enough money to go around. But I'd take DeRozan. I would take, if we could get them four together, yep, I'll take that. So they're my guys. Danny, you're still scratching your head? You want a bit more time? John, you got anything?
I'm definitely getting Kyle Lowry. So he would be at that point guard, and we just need a 3-level squad. I think, DeRozan or Tim Hardaway Jr. Mate, realistically.
Like it, and it is realistic. Yeah, Tim's a realistic one as well. So again, this will mean that Duncan won't be there because the luxury tax even doesn't go that far. Sam, what are you thinking?
I'm gonna go very unexpected. I'm gonna go Zach LaVine.
Woo!
And Kyle Lowry.
Zach and Kyle. Wow, that's some shooting. I like it. Yeah. Danny's shaking his head at that. He's
no. It's not. I'm not shaking my head at that. I don't know. I pretty sure that Kyle Lowry is going to be here. I agree with that.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know who else. But I think they're gonna try and figure out the big situation. I think is the key, and I think they're going to address that.
I don't think they'll throw a lot of money at that.
Okay.
Do you not? I think they are. I think they are. That's my.
This is the good thing, guys, is there is so much flexibility. There's so many different ways we can go here, and that's what's going to make this an incredibly exciting summer. And I will leave it by saying that Pat's last words were, yes, it was bad, but we will be back. And that gives me a lot of optimism to how this team's going to go. So it's going to be really exciting. We'll see what happens. We'll see who comes in. I'll be very surprised if it's not Kyle +1. We'll see what we can do. We've got a lot of faith in this front office, as always. But, guys, that was a lot of fun. That was the first ever live episode of Heating Up the UK. To end this season, we're going to take a little bit of a content break now. A couple of weeks or so. We will still be active through the summer, but a little bit of a break coming up now while we get some much deserved rest. Thank you very much for everybody who's joined in with us this season, who's commented, who's subscribed, all the rest of it. It's been fantastic. We will we're going to be doing some big things again next year. We're going to be giving a bit more production to this. There's a lot of exciting things coming on. I've got some other ideas in the pipeline as well. All will be revealed throughout the summer, and we will continue to do regular pods. But a little bit of a break just for the next couple of weeks. So again, thanks for everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time. We'll see what happens through the summer. Let's do it. Take care, guys.
Cheers.